Good evening. I'd like to call to order the public hearing of Council pertaining to Bylaw number 21-13. And we are starting the public hearing at 7 o'clock. This public hearing is held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26, and amendments thereto. I hereby declare the public hearing relating to Bylaw number 21-13 now open at 7 p.m. Can we have a motion to adopt the public hearing agenda? I have a motion. Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. We have a motion to adopt the public hearing agenda. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Legislative Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 21-13 proposes to include home occupation as a discretionary use in the R3 district. Public notices for Bylaw 21-13 were published in the Strathmore Times on March 26 and April 2nd, 2021, and also on the town's website.
The following rules of conduct will be followed during the public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point and shall be limited to 3 minutes in length. The order of presentation shall be the administration, those in favor of the bylaw, those opposed to the bylaw, any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes, and there will be no debating the bylaw. To date, no letters of support and none opposed have been received. Does the administration have any comments? Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Council. Tonight, Megan Williams, our Planner 3 with our Planning and Development Department, is here to speak on behalf of the presentation from administration. I know this is Megan's first appearance in front of Council, so I just wanted to introduce her. She came to us in January from Wheatland County. We were very pleased to have her on board with her experience and what have you. And Megan is present here tonight virtually to speak to this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome, Megan. Did you have any comments you'd like to add?
Good evening and thank you, Jim and Your Worship. I do have a brief presentation for you. I'm going to try sharing it, so bear with me here. Did that work?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'll just go over the background to the bylaw, the proposed amendments, and what administration's recommendations are. The PowerPoint presentation does start on page 8 of the public hearing package. To date, we did not receive any additional written comments or concerns. So the proposed amendment started with a resident's inquiry into how they could be able to apply for a home occupation development permit within the R3 high density residential district. At the time of their inquiry, home occupation wasn't a use within the R3 district, and therefore they were unable to submit an application. Administration then undertook some research and found the current practice of other municipalities is to include home occupation within their high-density residential districts. And then administration was directed by Council to bring the land use bylaw amendment forward. Bylaw 21-13 proposes 2 amendments to the land use bylaw. The first is to include home occupation as a discretionary use within the R3 district, and the second is to include a new regulation under section 3.15 that requires the applicant supply a letter of support from the condo board or their agent if the application is within a condominium. These proposed amendments do align with the town's land use bylaw and will allow for a development authority to administer more discretion over the review and approval of these applications, including the mitigation of any concerns through conditions. In conclusion, subject to consideration of the information given at the public hearing, administration is recommending that Council give second and third reading to the bylaw 21-13. That does conclude my presentation. I am available to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you so much.
Council, are there any questions for Megan at this time? Seeing none, I will turn to the next section. Is there anyone present who supports the bylaw who wishes to speak? Anyone online do we know of? No. Is there anyone present who opposes the bylaw who wishes to speak? Seeing none. Is there anyone present deemed to be affected by the bylaw who wishes to speak? And do the councillors have any questions? Seeing none, I hereby declare this public hearing for bylaw number 20-24 closed at 7:06 p.m. and will accept a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Councillor Corbeil to adjourn, and the motion is on the floor. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. And again, good evening to the public at home, people who are watching online. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Council starting at 7:06 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors that needs to be put on tonight? Seeing and hearing none, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration would like to request that Council add an in-camera matter under 3.1. The matter is a legal matter pertaining to FOIP Section 24(1)A. And administration would also like to recommend moving item 12.1 LUB amendment bylaw up to item 5.3.
Thank you for that. And at this time, I'm looking for a motion, Deputy Mayor Cox.
Your Worship, I'm sorry. Just could Jen repeat which item we're moving? 12.1?
Your Worship, that is correct. Item 12.1 to item 5.3.
Thank you.
And at this time, I'd look for Councillor Corbeil. Thank you. Would you mind making that motion?
Yes, I will. I confirm the agenda as amended.
Thank you. We have a motion to confirm the agenda as amended. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We're not going in camera at the start. We're going in camera at the end. We have no presentations or recognitions. Delegations is item 5. 5.1, Wheatland County Counseling. And I believe we have Rachel Dundas here with us tonight. So welcome, Rachel, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, I'm Rachel Dundas, the Executive Director and Founder of Wheatland County Counseling. So today I'm here to present on subsidized counseling in Strathmore and Wheatland County. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you guys information on the state of counseling in our local area, and also in the hopes of securing a spot in the municipal budget for funding for ongoing subsidized counseling for 2022 and beyond. So I recognize I only have 10 minutes to present, so I'll be as quick as possible. And first, I want to give you some quick background about the practice. Wheatland County Counseling was founded in Strathmore and Drumheller in the summer of 2017. What started as just myself in a single office in Hilton Plaza has now grown to include 2 locations and 17 staff, associates, and students supporting our residents. We are a service provider for the Ministry of Children's Services Intensive Family Intervention Program that is based out of our Drumheller office, and also for therapeutic services. This is for children in foster care. We are the service provider as well for the Strathmore Wheatland Wellness Project, and you'll find that project linked on the back page of this presentation. And also we are a recipient of and a service provider for COVID-19 addictions and mental health funding programs for subsidized counseling in both Strathmore and Drumheller. And for this year is unique. So the support we've received from municipalities have been amalgamated into a single program for this year. To give you some background on our subsidized counseling program, there is specific criteria that applies to residents to be able to access the service. So residents have to have no third-party extended health benefits. That's such as through an employer like Alberta Blue Cross. They must demonstrate financial need. So there's income caps on the program. And also they need to be presenting with mild or moderate mental health concerns only. This is because this is what the gap in service in our community is. Severe and chronic persistent mental health concerns should be seen at AHS Addictions and Mental Health. And indeed, in order to access services through AHS Addictions and Mental Health, you must meet criteria for a mental health diagnosis. So the mild and moderate concerns that don't cross that threshold into pathology are not eligible for services through AHS. Now for 2021, our funding for this program in our community has been combined with one-time funding from the province. So this year, we're staffed by a 0.8 FTE therapist, a 0.2 FTE supervisor, and 2.6 FTE practicum students. But we recognize that this provincial funding is one time, so the program will be changing as of September. We'll need to downgrade. Now, how much service are we providing? So this is our first quarter stats for 2021. We provided over 1,100 counseling sessions between our two locations. Of these, 417 were subsidized counseling, and 285 of those were Strathmore specific, which breaks down to about 24 sessions per week across the first quarter. And who is accessing these subsidized counseling services? So again, this is just January till March. We served 155 files. So what that means is that a family is counted as one file in these statistics. So 97 adults, 50 children and youth, 4 families, and 4 couples. And the residency of these clients is primarily Strathmore. You'll see there's 16% unknown here. And that is a bit of an administrative piece here where when clients come in, they fill in a client information sheet with their address. And in some cases, this gets missed. But we do know, however, that they are eligible for our programming simply because that screening of residency is completed on the phone before the intake appointment is booked. You'll see as well Wheatland County, and because this year our funding was combined with provincial funding, our residency criteria was broadened to include residents of Langdon and some Rocky View there. Now, our current program funding source, our municipal funding runs from September 2020 to September 2021, and that's making up 74% of our annual budget. The Strathmore, Town of Strathmore funding we received this year, thank you very much, is about 18.6% of our annual budget this year. And then Wheatland County at 7.4%. The Strathmore and Wheatland County programs run on the calendar year, January to December. Now, the major purpose of my presentation, however, is to speak to the importance of confirmed funding. We're expecting a loss, of course, of 74% of our 2021 funding in 2022. And confirmation of funding is very important for program continuity, client care, and staffing needs. Our 2021 funding from the municipality was not received this year until late March. And without the provincial funding that we had to bridge that gap, we would have turned away over 150 residents in need. Let's see here. Now, I'm sure as you guys can agree, the mental health needs continue to rise in the wake of COVID-19. The Canadian Mental Health Association has completed 7 major surveys across Canada in the past year. The most recent ended in March 2021, and their data indicated 1 in 5 Canadians reported significant mental distress. This is over 2,800 residents in Strathmore alone. Now, I won't read out all of the other stats there. You guys do have a copy of my presentation, but if you want to learn more about us, feel free to visit our website or to visit the websites of the 2 projects that we are service providers of. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for providing us with the visuals for it in the presentation. Do we have questions from councillors for our presenter? Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that in work that I do outside of council and in volunteering, have lots of opportunity to see the good that has come about as a result of this addition to our counseling processes in our community. It has made a lasting and fundamental difference. It has been an incredible asset, especially in this time of COVID. And I cannot emphasize how critical it has been to individuals and to families as they try to navigate these very difficult times. I want to reach out to Rachel and her weekend counseling program. It has identified the needs so specifically and so comprehensively in our community, and has created this community-based safety net generated program that has brought about immense good. And I really congratulate her on your astuteness in what you've brought about. And I'm very humbled and grateful to see the profound difference you've made in the community as a result of this program. And I'm glad that we were able to help in a very small way. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Sobel, followed by Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for your presentation and all the work you do, Rachel. Two questions for you. First, and this is, I'm sure there's a real good answer for this, but I'm looking at residency of clients.
Sure.
And I'm not seeing anybody from Drumheller in here, and you're based in Drum. So I guess the more important question is, why aren't you serving the clients of Drum?
So, well, our main office is here in Strathmore and Crystal Ridge, and we also have an office in Drumheller. The statistics that I've pulled for you are only for Strathmore because I was presenting to the town of Strathmore Council. So I haven't included, the only stat that included Drumheller was the 400 and something subsidized counseling sessions. And then I broke that down to be 285 were Strathmore based.
Okay, the one I'm looking at is residency of clients, which includes Calgary, Siksika.
Yes.
Rocky
Okay.
View.
So those are the residency of the clients who accessed the Strathmore-based subsidized counseling. The reason at the Strathmore office, the reason that Siksika and there's some Calgary and Rocky View is because of, normally it would be Wheatland County and Strathmore only, but because the program this year was funded by provincial funding, we did broaden that criteria to include Rocky View, Langdon residents. My office manager indicated the Calgary residents were clients who were residing here but moved out of town. So,
yeah, and that's great. So, are you supplying services to Drum as well?
Indeed, I am. Yes.
Okay.
We have an additional subsidized counseling program there. Yeah.
Gotcha. But that's completely separate from this one.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Now I've got that clear in my head. Now the other question I had for you is I'd love to know more about why the province is ending their funding for this, and I don't know if you have any information on that, but more importantly, is there anything that we can do as a council to try to get that back into line? Because I would think that this is kind of an important program.
Absolutely. So when COVID-19 hit, the province announced 3 rounds of funding proposals for mental health and addictions initiatives. These were opened up last spring. And this funding we received was part of a round 1 application. And we were part of round 2 and round 3 through usually in partnership with Growing Family Society, typically. Mm-hmm. But because the province had very different focus for each round of applications, subsidized counseling, we were already funded for that. We couldn't ask for more. And the province has been very clear in that this is one-time emergency mental health funding because of COVID. A way that council could support perhaps continued funding, I'm guessing, would be to reach out to Leila here in Chestermere. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was where I go. And thank you very much. I'm just hoping that the province realizes that the issues surrounding COVID are not done yet.
Exactly.
We still happen to be in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. I'll do something on that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Corbeil, followed by Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. I want to first of all thank you for coming with this presentation. I do believe that our next pandemic will be in regards to mental health. So this is not finishing or going to be going away anytime soon. Is there anything else that you're actually asking for by coming forward tonight besides maybe pushing for continued funding from the province?
What I'm hoping is that council will include a line in their budget for 2022 and beyond to offer so that we have the confirmation of ongoing support of a subsidized counseling program. This allows me to keep my staff in place and also to recruit students who work out of the program under supervision, because that's typically done several months ahead. And so, if we don't know if we're going to have funding in January, we're going to miss recruiting our student in the fall, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this report. I just want to make sure that we're doing justice for the work that you're doing in Strathmore here. So this, I'm just going to hold it up here. This graphic that you showed us, like the one that has the residency of clients. So the graph itself, it looks, it shows that Strathmore residents are getting, let's say, around 80% thereabouts of the counseling, let's say. But then the number you listed is around 54. Is the 54, that's just probably an error then?
So as you'll see, there's 16.1% unknown. And that was due to, suppose I need to tighten things up with my admin team. When a resident phones to access service, they're screened for their eligibility in terms of income and residency prior to the intake appointment being booked. But somewhere along the line, for 16% of our 155 people who accessed during Q1, that residency did not get transferred into our software. So I wasn't able to pull the full data on the other 16%. My admin team is working on tightening that up for me, so I have better data to report. So I guess that would be about 70% if we're assuming that 16% is Strathmore, which I would assume. This is only our Strathmore office statistics. This doesn't include Drumheller office.
Okay. When you add up all the percentages, it adds up to around 80%, including that 16%.
Oh, I must have made an error there then.
Okay.
I obviously didn't double check you guys. I must apologize for that.
Okay.
But I would be happy to look into that, Councillor Montgomery, and get you more solidified statistics.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that you're making your case the best you can. And it looks to me like even if we don't count the 16, it looks like, in the 70s, there's 70% roughly of Strathmore residents. So I just want to thank you for the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
Thank you for everything you do. I appreciate everything. I think all your statistics are great, but when it does come down to funding, I will have to recluse myself because my daughter works for you.
Okay, wonderful. I wondered when I saw the last name.
Yes. So good on you. She is out of the Drumheller office, people, but she is a student. So I thank the province for all the funding as well. And I thank you very, very deeply from the bottom of our hearts of all the work you're doing for the mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cox. Thank you again, Rachel, for your presentation. And if we can assist as far as reaching out, as Councillor Sobel was talking, if we can do anything to help support and reach out to our provincial MLA to voice our support for wheatland counseling, we will definitely do that. So please stay in touch if you need us.
Wonderful. Will do.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And that brings us to 5.2, the Avail Chartered Professional Accountants, and Mr. Darren Adamson is back with us again. Darren, are you there? Good evening and welcome.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. Are you able to hear my audio? I know I've been having a bit of troubles with my headset today.
Yeah, it's good here. Counselors, you're okay at home? Yeah, we're good. So Darren,
Okay.
anytime you're ready with your presentation, we are ready.
Okay, perfect. I am just going to share my screen. Okay, did that work? Can you see the presentation with the highlighter, I guess?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, perfect. So what I did get a chance to go through the statements with the Audit Finance Committee earlier, and we went through a bit of detail. So I'll try to keep it to high level for Council. I'll present what I think are the highlights, but of course, any questions, please let me know. What I plan to cover today is some highlights from our independent auditors report, some of the highlights of the financial results for the year, some of the notes. I don't want to go through all of them by any means. They're mostly self-explanatory, I think, but I do want to highlight a few of them. And then I do have a few indicators of financial condition. So some of the graphs that we prepare each year, I want to just kind of highlight a few of those as well. So if we want to get right into it, the independent auditors report. First thing that we note is it's a clean auditor's opinion. So in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So we did all the work we felt was necessary in order to provide our opinion. And once again, we have a clean auditor's opinion as we would expect. The auditor's report points out the various responsibilities of the different categories, I guess. So management itself is responsible for the financial statements. Council is responsible to oversee management and to formally approve the financial statements. And as auditors, we're responsible for the few things that are listed here. So identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement. We focus our efforts more on the riskier areas. Understanding internal controls, evaluating the town's policies and estimates, concluding on the going concern assumption, and evaluating the presentation of the financial statements. So none of these responsibilities have changed from the prior year, but the auditor's report does point those out. Sometimes there's confusion as to who's responsible for what. So a few years ago, the auditor's report was amended to specifically include all that right in the body of the report. Getting into some of the financial results. So if we look at the revenues of the town, for 2020, total about $31.6 million, and that's up about $3 million or so over last year, and about $1.1 million better than budget. So a good year revenue-wise, despite the year that we had. Property taxes are up a bit, about $600,000, but always comparable to budget. User fees and sales of goods are up about $1.3 million. And most of that is in water, sewer, garbage fees charged, and that's up about $1.2 million over last year. And it also includes franchise fees as well. And then the one thing that helps out quite a bit this year again is the government transfers for operating, and that's up about $1.4 million. The majority of that is due to the MOST grant, or the Municipal Operating Support Transfer. So that's the provincial, federal grant, basically for COVID effects. And so I know that was a big help. At this time last year, we we were pretty uncertain as to what, if any, help municipalities would get. And so that grant came along, and I know it helped out a lot. So total revenues again are up about 3 million. The expenses came in at about just under 34 million this year. Very, very comparable to last year, down slightly. Some of the changes, admin is up a bit. One of the big reasons is just more staffing and more contracted services. So with everybody working from home, for example, there was more IT support needed this year, various other things, but that's kind of the main reason there. Police, fire, disaster, or protective services, I like to call it, is up about 437,000, and the main reason for that is the new command center to deal with the COVID effects. And so that was about 437,000. So that's the majority of the increase there. Policing was also up a bit. Transportation services was actually down this year. Previous year there were more snow events, so this year there's less overtime, less sand and gravel. Planning and development is also down pretty significantly, down about 821,000. And I think probably with the year we had, that was to be expected, reduced travel, reduced overtime. And then Parks and Recreation took a big hit as well, or took a hit on the revenue side. And also you can see the reduced costs on the expense side. So with the closure of recreation facilities during the year, that's down. And also 2019's expenses were a bit higher than usual because of the opening of the sports center. So there was those opening costs that we didn't have this year. So overall, with the reduced activities for COVID and whatnot, we're pretty consistent on the expense side and very comparable to what was budgeted. So if we take our revenues less our expenses from operations, we get a deficiency of about 2.3 million, which is actually an improvement over last year by about 3.2 million, and is better than what was budgeted by $1 million or so. So we're, even though it's a deficiency, it's still better than what was expected. So then what we do from that number is we add in our capital revenues. So these are revenues that are specifically geared towards tangible capital asset additions. So this year we got about 4.6 million of government grants to help fund capital asset additions, and an additional 1.5 million of capital assets that were contributed directly to the town. So about 6 million of total revenues. We'll see in a minute that there were a total of around 17 million of capital asset additions. So 6 million of this funding goes directly to that, and then the other 11 million is funded by the town through either debentures or reserves. So at the end of that, so the total bottom line for the year is a surplus of 3,775,000. So it's up over last year, and that's because we had higher capital revenues. Total surplus, accumulated surplus at the end of the year, 206.5 million. We'll see this number a couple times. That number represents the total surpluses that the town's had since the very beginning of the town, way back whenever that was, 100 and some years ago. So if we go back to the statement of financial position, so the income statement kind of shows us how did we do this year, and then the statement of financial position shows here's our financial position as of the end of December. So how it works is we take our financial assets minus our liabilities. That comes down to net financial debt, or if it was positive, it would be net financial assets. And then on the next slide, we'll see we add in the non-financial assets to come to a total accumulated surplus once again. So you can see net financial debt has increased by about 7.7 million. So our net financial position has decreased fairly significantly. So it's something that the town's going to want to keep an eye on for sure. We know why it happened, and it happened because of the significant investments in tangible capital assets. So there's still assets, but now they've just moved from financial down to non-financial. But it's something to keep an eye on, just to make sure we can fund that. So what happened with financial assets? It's down about 2.5 million. Both cash and investments are down. again, basically because we invested that money into tangible capital assets. And then liabilities have increased largely on the long-term debt line here. That's up about $5.5 million. During the year, there was long-term debt proceeds of just under $7 million, and then repayments of $1.5 million. So long-term debt is up, liabilities are up, and assets are down. So our net financial debt, again, is at 11.7. So there's that number again. Then we add in our non-financial assets to come down to that same accumulated surplus number that we saw on a previous slide, $206.5 million. The biggest number that we see every year is tangible capital assets. $206.5 million last year. It's up to $218 million this year. So what happened this year was there was about $17.2 million of additions, and then the capital assets get amortized or expensed over their useful life. And so this year we expensed about $5.6 million, bringing us to the 218. The additions this year of $17.2 million, I'm sure you're aware of the big items, but I'll just remind you, the town hall was probably the biggest item. Strathmore Common was also a big item as well. Between those two, it was a little over $12 million. Then there's a whole host of other items, other infrastructure, engineered structures. There's a fire truck and machinery and equipment and all that kind of stuff. So quite a big year for capital asset additions. Again, over $17 million. When we look at on the balance sheet itself or the statement of financial position, we just reconcile down to total accumulated surplus, and we're not allowed to show the breakdown of what that represents. So we show the details in Note 9 and in Schedule 1. So I'll just go to Note 9 here and we can see the breakdown. So the total $206.5 million, $197 million roughly has been already spent and invested in the tangible capital assets. So it's still surplus and has service potential. So we can still use those assets, but it's not surplus that we can spend. The money's already spent and it's just invested in assets. Whereas the remainder, about $9.6 million, is what we call, or I call, spendable surplus. So it's positive, but it's not excessive by any means. So I think it's important to understand the breakdown here. A couple other notes. One is the debt limit note. Each year, the debt limit is calculated just based on your current year revenues. So this year, the debt limit based on the MGA is about $47.4 million. You have about $24.4 million of debt, so you have $23 million capacity remaining. So it's about half your capacity roughly is used and half is unused. COVID-19, everybody's fully aware of the effects of COVID-19, but we do need to point that out in the notes that the situation, the very last line here, is continually changing, and the future impact for the town isn't readily determinable. So we'll see what happens going forward. Some of the things that happened this year, as we know, we had reduced user fees for the arena and recreation, decreased penalties on taxes, but then that was offset largely by the most grant. So we'll see what happens going forward, but there's still uncertainty, so we kind of point that out. That's kind of everything I wanted to cover on the financial statements themselves, but we also do what we call indicators of financial condition. So it's kind of a 5-year graphical representation of some key financial indicators of the town, and we can compare to the town over the 5-year period, and we can also compare to your peers or other towns and municipalities in Alberta. So when we look at that, we'll see different lines, and one of them is going to be comparables, same type. So that would be other towns with a similar population size, and we've used plus or minus 25%. So that only gives us 5 different, four comparables plus Strathmore. Comparables, any type this would include cities and counties, but also the same comparable population sizes. And then there's another one that's all the towns in Alberta, so we don't list those all here. But so some of those indicators, the first one I like to look at is financial assets to liabilities. So the town of Strathmore is the blue line, and it extends to 2020 because we have year numbers. We don't have all the comparatives yet until they're reported to the province and they put them on their website, but it does show enough to see some trends. We know that Strathmore has invested significantly over the last number of years in capital asset. And so at that point in time, or during that time, our financial assets have decreased because our non-financial assets have increased and our liabilities have gone up. So we can see a downward trend, which we understand why it is. And so it's something that we don't want to continue forever. Obviously, at some point we'll have financial difficulties from a cash flow perspective. So it's something to watch for and just to keep an eye on. Over this same 5-year period, your tangible capital assets did increase by 40 million. So your total surplus and your total capital asset pool has increased significantly. So we know that's why this is happening. So it's just something to keep an eye on, just to make sure that everything is in order. This next graph shows the operating expenses compared to the taxable assessment. So the taxable assessment is what we're using as our proxy for the overall economy. You can see over the period of time, the properties in the town get assessed by your assessor each year. And if the value is going up, then the economy is going up. And so you can see it has been going up. And at the same time, your expenses have been going up a bit as well. So if there's a flat line, that means your expenses are basically exactly in tune with the economy. If we see a significant increasing slope, we would be concerned because that would mean you're spending in excess of the economy. And if it was a decreasing slope, then you might want to look at that and say we're not maybe spending enough to keep in line with the economy. Your graph line here is pretty flat, maybe slightly increasing, but it's basically pretty flat. So that's kind of what we would expect. There's another graph in a minute that's going to show the offsetting revenue for that. But first we'll talk about public debt charges to revenues. So you can see the blue line here again. Over the last couple of years, we've had some pretty significant increases in the long-term debt to fund some of those capital projects. About 7 million this year and about just under 9 million last year were new debt proceeds. So that reflects down here in the debt servicing line. So the debt servicing is the scheduled payments of principal and interest that'll be paid next year. So in 2020, 3,644,000 will be paid out on loan payments to cover principal and interest. And based on this year's revenue, that's about 12% of your revenues will be going towards debt payments. And you can see a few years ago that was 6%. So that's how the effect of the new loans show, I guess, in this graph. So here, this next graph is the own source revenues compared to the taxable assessment. So here we're looking at the revenues that the town itself generates through your own sources. So we're excluding government grants, provincial grants, federal grants, and we're just including like taxes, user fees, that kind of thing that the town generates itself. So again, your line here is basically flat or slightly increasing. So it's very in tune with the expense side. So I think that I don't have any concerns here because your revenues and expenses are pretty well correlated. And then the last graph I have here is accumulated surplus available for future use. And I know we talked about this a little bit, what the current year was. So you have about 9.6 million of accumulated surplus available for future spending. That's down from about 17 million 4 years ago. And again, over that same period, we had increased tangible capital assets of 40 million. So we know where it went. But again, it's just something to kind of keep an eye on. Some of these different graphs all are kind of pointing to the same thing, and we know exactly what happened, and it's just something to kind of watch out for. So that's everything that I wanted to cover. But of course, if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you for your presentation, Darren. And I'll turn to councillors if they have some questions. And then I have one question. I'll do mine after everyone has spoken. Councillor Corbeil, you're up first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I asked this of our auditors during our audit meeting. I do have a question, though, for Mr. Teedy. Is he there by chance?
He sure is.
Okay, awesome. My question actually had to do with amortization of tangible capital assets and why there was the difference that there was. I will find it specifically. It's in, sorry, I know it's in note 14. That's where I'm getting it from.
That's on page 15.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Page 15, note 14. It has the amortization of tangible capital assets. I just would like to know, I thought that would be more predictable than the difference that it was.
The amortization on capital assets is in accord with our tangible capital asset policy. We have a certain rate of amortization depending on what the class of asset is. And so we've added significantly over the last year, as has been pointed out, in terms of the purchase of tangible capital assets. So as the assets increase, the amortization would also increase in that same realm.
So may I follow up, Your Worship?
You bet.
Thank you. Are we not including what we're building in our budget for that year, I guess, for the budget?
Yes, we normally do, but it appears on the surface that we have not provided sufficient for the amortization in our budget. Keep in mind, the amortization is not a cash expenditure. It's a non-cash expenditure, so it does not affect taxation directly. As far as the amortization, where it does affect taxation is within the borrowing costs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Any other questions from councillors? Seeing none, I have a question for Darren. Darren, one of the things you talked about was debt ratio, and from the year that I got on council, I was always told that that's a fairly good indicator of how your debt is and how you're doing as a town. With ours, I think we put in our own limits to ensure that we were careful with our debt ratio. When I came on in 2010, our debt ratio was up at about 66%. And with all the capital projects that we had in 2020, including this big one and the Commons project, I think you said we're around 50%. So what would be your view on seeing that change between 2010 and 2021? What kind of an indication would that give on the financial state of the town in the past 10 or 11 years?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's not really an easy answer because there's so many things that are correlated and kind of drive the whole discussion. So it's one thing, you can't look at one line item without kind of knowing what else is happening with the town. So we know tangible capital assets, investing in infrastructure is important and needs to happen. You've had some very big projects. You had the water line a few years ago, the town hall this year, and lots of other projects. So those need to be invested in. So if you look at the overall health of the town, you kind of look at how's your capital asset condition overall. And if you're going to compare yourself to a town down the road, you'd need to know the condition of your assets and the condition of their assets and use that, and also your financial condition that's easily found on your financial statements. The condition of the tangible capital assets isn't easy to find, right? That you need engineers or specialists or somebody to help you out with that. So you kind of need to know the two together. I know you've invested significantly in your capital asset pool over the last number of years, and so that's why I know that has affected your financial position. As far as the overall condition of your total tangible capital asset pool, that's beyond my expertise. So I'm sure that you have a better idea of that than I do, but I'm guessing that it's pretty good given the amount of that you've invested in there. But that's something that you'd probably want to make sure you take into consideration when you're doing that overall analysis and seeing where you want to go. And as long as you got a plan to pay off the debt and to make sure that you've got enough cash coming in to pay the bills, then obviously you're fine. And I'm sure management's got their thumb on that. I think I hope that answers your question, but if not, let me know.
That definitely helps. I mean, we knew we were in a situation where we did have some capital expenditures this year or last year in 2020. We do have a major road project that's coming up, Westridge Road, but I think we have a funding situation for that that's going to be fine. But yeah, you do have to find a balance between moving the town forward with capital projects, because the town does need things, and managing your debt and managing how you're going to take care of it. We do have a new source of revenue coming on stream as of this year with the Solarcraft solar farm project that's going to be bringing in fresh revenue. So that's going to help us a lot in our financial position, as well as dealing with the debt situation of the town. And I understand and I hear you as far as you saying, keep an eye on your capital expenditures in the next little while, and we'll definitely use that as a guiding principle. And we've got Mel Teedy, who's also giving us the same advice. So thank you, and thank you very much for your report. Question for administration: will this be available online for people at home?
Your Worship, yes, it will be. It will also be published in our 2020 annual report.
Okay, thank you. So if you're at home watching, you'll be able to pour through this document when it's put on our town website. So thank you again, Darren, for your presentation. Very, very, very interesting.
Thank you. I just got a couple of quick things to add. And the first was during our Finance Committee meeting earlier, there was a typo that was noticed in the commitment note 17. The commitment, it said that the price per kilowatt hour was $4.55 or $4.55, and it should have been 4.5 cents basically, rather than $4.50 per kilowatt hour. So that will be corrected on the final version. And so what will happen now is, assuming that council approves the financial statements formally tonight, my administration will send you tomorrow, whoever is signing, so your worship plus another councillor and management, you'll get an email that'll come from Right Signature, sign it electronically. Once that's done, then it's all formally executed and you'll have your formal copies. We'll make sure we send the copy to Municipal Affairs well in advance of the deadlines, and so everything will be taken care of that way. So you can watch for those emails coming. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Mel and Lisa in particular, and everyone else for all their assistance helping us during our audit. It's definitely appreciated when we work with people who are cooperative and easy to work with. So I just wanted to say thanks to them.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you very much for that, Darren. And thank you, Mel, on behalf of myself and council. I know it takes a great deal of time for you and your staff to go through this and to be that available for our audit. So thank you. So I guess at this point, we're looking for a motion then concerning the financial statements. Council, you'll find that on page 14 of your agenda package. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that council accept the 2020 audited financial statements, the management letter, and the indicators of financial condition as presented by Mr. Darren Adamson of Avail LLP, Chartered Professional Accountants, and authorize 2 members of council to sign the financial statements.
Thank you for that motion. Now that there's a motion on the floor, is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you again, Darren, and thank you, councillors.
Okay, you're welcome. And I think if you're finished with me, I will sign off unless.
Deputy Mayor Cox, do you have a question before he leaves?
It's just an administration question, Your Worship. Because we amended a certain portion, do we need to amend that motion to say as amended?
The typo that was mentioned, is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? No,
Does that matter?
I think it's
No.
going to be corrected anyway, so
Okay,
I think
thank
we're
you.
good. According to Jennifer, we're good.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Thank you, Darren.
Okay,
Good night.
thanks everybody. See you later.
See ya. So that brings us to 5.3, which is bylaw number 21-13, land use bylaw amendment, addition of home occupations use to R3, sorry, my glasses are not on, R3 district, second and third readings. And councillors, that's on page 149. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give second reading to bylaw 21-13 land use bylaw amendment bylaw, addition of home occupant use to the R3 district.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have a motion for second reading, is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And Councillor Corbeil.
I move the council give third and final reading to bylaw number 21-13 land use bylaw amendment bylaw, addition of home occupation use to the R3 district.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We have nothing on the, we have no consent agenda tonight, so we go on to item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, adoption of the March 17th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes. Councillor Peterson.
I would move that council adopt the March 17th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. 7.2, adoption of the March 29th, 2021 special council meeting minutes, page 60. Councillor Corbeil, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move the council adopt the March 29th, 2021 special council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. 7.3, adoption of the April 7th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes, page 63. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move the council adopt the April 7th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no tabled items for item 8. We move on to item 9, items and reports from administration. 9.1, 2021 FCSS grant recommendations. And tonight we have again Catherine Walsh with us. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Before you this evening is a report for 2021 FCSS grant recommendations. The total amount of funds was $59,000. Recommendations were determined by aligning the organizations with Grant Program Policy 5102, Section 5.1, and the Program Procedures Application Review and Approval Section 3.2 in the Grant Program Procedure Guidelines. We feel that the grants that have been recommended align well with the Council's strategic plan as community and social issue through partnerships and collaboration, and promotes inclusivity and diversity. So what we are asking for this evening is that Council approve the following grant recommendations for Foothills Fetal Alcohol Society, accredited supports to the community, Golden Hills School Division, Strathmore Municipal Library, 2 programs for them, Growing Families Society, Junior Achievement, and Rural Calgary Postpartum Support Group. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions from councillors at home for Catherine? Seeing none, then I'm looking for a motion. Oh, Councillor Peterson.
I was just going to move the recommendation, Your Worship. I can read it into the record, but as Catherine already read it, I would just move the recommendation on page 70.
I'll just check with Jennifer. You probably should be read because each aspect has a dollar figure attached. So if
okay,
you don't mind reading.
I will read it. I'll read the recommendation in Your Worship. I would move the council approve the following Strathmore Family and Community Support Services grant applications for funding. Foothills Fetal Alcohol Society, $4,500. Accredited supports to community, $4,500. Golden Hills School Division, $5,700. Strathmore Municipal Library, Visiting Library, $3,500. Growing Family Society, $34,100. Strathmore Municipal Library, Intergenerational Pen Pal Project, $700. Junior Achievement, Southern Alberta, $3,000. Rural Calgary E-Postpartum Support Group, $3,000.
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. If I could just speak briefly to the motion, I am so impressed with not just who FCSS has chosen to get these grants. I know that they have the discernment that we need so badly for them to be able to do this, but I'm so appreciative of the reporting process and the matrix that they put in place to be able to evaluate these programs effectively year over year and see the benefits and be able to report them or to get those reports to the FCSS and be able to use those to report so effectively so that they can understand unequivocally the supports to community. And so often, you know, we report statistics, we report all the horrific statistics that come out of our community and when we fall upon hard times. But very rarely can we ever come to something and say, all of these things did not happen because we had this safety net in place. But this is what FCSS has given to us. It's a longitudinal process that allows us to measure exactly the good of the funding that's being put into supporting our community. And every single one of these supports is a support that is engendering future consideration for greater capacity building within our community. So I really congratulate Catherine and the oversight that they've provided on this. I am very appreciative of it. It's so well done. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. I will call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And Catherine, thank you and your staff for all you did with the FCSS and these grant application, bringing them to us and the work you've done. The work you do is obviously, it just makes people's lives that much better and safer. So great to have you in that department again. Thank you. And that brings us to the Health Subcommittee Letter of Understanding, page 80.
Yes, Your Worship and Council. The Health Subcommittee Transportation Initiative is similar to the agreement with the Town of Strathmore, RCMP, and Siksika Nation. This transportation initiative would be from the Strathmore Hospital directly to the Siksika shelter. The service would be offered to First Nation persons who have arrived at the hospital via ambulance without any support to return to Siksika First Nation. We are recommending that Council approve $1,500 in support of the transportation initiative, which will be matched by Siksika First Nation at a future Siksika Council meeting. This funding for this year can be funded through the Smile Cookie Campaign Fund through FCSS. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor, we're looking for councils. If you have any questions first for Catherine, and if not, we're looking for a motion to put on the floor. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, Catherine, if this is approved, have you opened up this lines of communication with the owners of Tim Hortons, Kevin and Tracy Corpy, to let them know what benefit within the community the Smile campaign has really done for us?
Yes, through your worship to Council Bauer, we are in the process, and I've just finalized a letter to the Tim Hortons to give some information about where this money has gone in the past. Thank you.
I know that they're going to be absolutely thrilled, as I am. And the last time I talked to them, they were looking forward to making this Smile campaign even bigger than they did last year. So I look forward to hearing what other wonderful places that you are going to make a big difference in our community. Thank you, Catherine.
Councillor Sobel, then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Catherine, for this. The issue of clients being brought to the hospital via ambulance and then having to sit there for hours and hours and hours after discharge in order to get home is a fairly larger issue than just this. Although I'm quite happy we're tackling one end of it. I know for a fact that this issue arises fairly more often than we would like with Sagewood, because that return trip is not guaranteed. So my question in this particular instance, seeing that these clients are coming into the hospital via ambulance, do we have taxi services that can transport persons that require that have a wheelchair or are physically disabled in any way?
Hi, through your worship, to Councillor Sobel. There is some details that are being looked at and some information gathered on this process, and so what we're looking for tonight is the approval of this dollar amount, and then we will move forward at that time. But that's a very valid question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the motion that council approve a contribution of $1,500 for the transportation initiative to be funded through the Strathmore Family Community Services Smile Cookie campaign through the Tim Hortons annual donation. And Your Worship, I really believe in this. I think as exactly what Councillor Sobel said, it supports that. In the conclusion on page 81, page 2 of the report, it mentions that this group will be reviewing this quarterly. And one of the things that I would really encourage them, it says that transportation will be to the Siksika shelter. And the Siksika shelter is a really great place. It's staffed 24 hours a day by incredibly competent people with great outside supports. But I carry some concerns that, that will be the drop-off location, but there will be people that will want to go home and people that aren't maybe well suited. And so that's just my concern, is that be one place that be really looked at in those quarterly reviews to see if there's capacity to build in to maybe also support people who need to come from the farther reaches of the reserve. The reserve is a very big place to come to the shelter to pick those people up. And that just might be something that we want to look at when those quarterly reviews come forward. But I certainly support this dollar amount for the purpose for which it's been designed. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give kudos again. I think the fact that this fits in so well with our tripartite agreement with Siksika and that they're going to match our dollars, it's one of the initiatives that our joint council meetings have put together for things that we can try to improve. And the fact that they're joining with us is wonderful. And again, if I can remind the public at home or the media who are watching, Siksika reached out to us and our residents and offered testing at their nation. So this is another example of the two groups coming together to try to improve things. So good job. Councillor Bauer, did you have another comment, or is that okay? So I guess I'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion? And the motion is carried. Thank you very much, Catherine. That brings us to item 9.3, Proclamation Emergency Management Week, May 2nd to 9th, 2021. And we have Acting Chief Bass Owl, who's here tonight. Welcome, Bass.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council may remember from last year, Emergency Management Week is the first week in May all across Canada. What we're looking for Council to do is to proclaim the first week in May, May 2nd to 9th, as Emergency Management Week. Obviously, with current COVID restrictions and everything that still continues on with this pandemic, we can't do the activities that we have done in the past, but we are looking at doing a virtual campaign to promote Emergency Management Week and preparedness as well. So I'm asking Council to proclaim May 2nd to 9th as Emergency Management Week for the town of Strathmore.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make note that there's a typo on the actual proclamation. It says May 2nd to 8th. Are we going the 8th or the 9th?
Sorry, it's the entire week, so it would be, I believe, from the 2nd to the 9th.
Thank you. So I would move that Council declare May 2nd to 9th, 2021 Emergency Management Week.
Thank you for that motion. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Beth. And that brings us to 9.4, 2020 Fire Underwriters Survey results. Again, we have Acting Chief Bassal to present.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may just ask for a minute of latitude before I start my presentation, I would just like to acknowledge the passing of one of our volunteer members this past weekend. I regret to inform Council and the public that we lost a young member of our fire department due to cancer this past weekend. He lost his fight with cancer on Saturday. I want to acknowledge Joe Blakeney and his contribution to this community. Although it was very short, Joel would have been with us for a long time in this community contributing. So I just want to acknowledge Joel's contribution, and our sympathies go out to, especially to his family, his wife Carly, and his young daughter Chloe. Our thoughts and prayers are with them as they go through this difficult time. So I thank you for that latitude. I think that that just needs to be acknowledged. So thank you for that. Just moving on with the Fire Underwriter Survey, I wanted to just present Council, and I apologize. This is my first time presenting in this setting, so I just wanted to start the presentation if I could. So a bit of background for Council. The Fire Underwriters Survey, they're an independent organization that evaluates a number of factors within the community in relation to fire protection. So as in the report that's presented to Council, it occurs every 5 years. It occurs every 5 year cycle or when there's a significant change. Just wanted to present just some brief bulletins regarding the Fire Underwriter Survey. So why is it important? Well, it's an independent evaluation of the fire service in the community, its operations, as well as the capabilities of the fire service. So it's an outside look. So if you look at it, it's really a measure of risk for the department. It's a measure of gaps that we can close. The other significant piece of it is that the insurance industry uses these insurance ratings to set the policies for both commercial, industrial, as well as residential homes within the community. So it does affect homeowner insurance, it does affect business insurance. So that's why it's important, and that's why these surveys take some time and a lot of effort goes into this. So on a very high level, and by no means am I a complete expert on the Fire Underwriter Survey, what they completely look at, but I grabbed this off their website, and it really looks at 4 pieces. So it looks at the risk of the community, the construction, the layouts, all those things, as well as the fire protection, the occupancies that are within the community. It evaluates the water supplies, so looking at the mains, the hydrants, the capacities that we have within this community. It assesses the fire department from an operational perspective, from staffing to fire prevention and all those things as well. And then the fire safety controls, I apologize, prevention is in there. But what we do as a community for pre-planning, for fire prevention activities as well. So if you think of those as 4 buckets that they evaluate, the fire department submits the information regarding, you know, the things around our equipment, our apparatus, the size of the apparatus, the pumping capacity, age, as well as the town infrastructure, water supply, and those type of activities. Based on that, there's 2 ratings that the underwriter survey comes up with. And the first one that I'll highlight is what they call the Public Fire Protection Classification. So it's a rating that comes from them. And what you see on the presentation right now, the previous rating for the Public Fire Protection Classification for the town of Strathmore was a 7. And this is on a scale of 1 to 10. And if, for simplicity's sake, 10 being no fire protection whatsoever, 1 being the best in class, if you will. So for the first one, where it's hydrant protected and it's within 5 kilometers of the fire station, our previous ranking was a 7. It has been moved to a 4, which is a good news story. Okay, so that is a drastic improvement for that rating. So that's good for the residents of the community. It's good for the fire department. The other 2 ratings haven't changed, and they will not change because of the distance to either the fire hall or a water supply. So those will remain constant. So that's one of the things. The Public Fire Protection Classification really affects industrial, commercial, multifamily type of homes. The second thing that they look at would be the dwelling protection factor. And you'll see the same, they've used the same classification. So the previous rating for the town of Strathmore was a 3A. This is on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, very similar to what I mentioned before. 5 is, you know, very little protection or unprotected, and 1 is best in class. Oh, thank you. So previous for the town of Strathmore, it was a 3A. We have moved that rating to a 2 based on everything that's happened within the department. So again, it's a good news story. It's an decrease in ratings, but it's an improvement in the overall fire protection for the town of Strathmore. So the other 2 that are there, again, because of distance for our hydrants and distance from the fire hall, those ratings remain unchanged. So it is a good news story. The fire underwriters surveys do not set insurance rates for policyholders, but it's conceivable because of the increase or betterment of the ratings that our residents and our commercial properties will see a potential decrease in premiums related to fire protection ratings on their insurance. So this is a good news story for the town of Strathmore for sure. So what's next? For the fire department itself, there's a couple areas that they mentioned. The report from the Fires Underrated Survey is attached for Council's perusal. You'll see all the ratings. I summarized it into 3 key areas where we can continue to improve those ratings even more that I had mentioned. The first one is staffing, the continual involvement of the department. So that's one of the parameters they looked at. Obviously, we can get better ratings if we have a full-time complement within the hall. Currently, the hall is staffed for 12 hours, where we have members that are at the hall providing that initial first engine response. So they are at the hall from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. If we were to move that to 24-hour coverage, conceivably, your ratings would get better because of that. Okay, so it's a continual evolution. It is not only on that aspect, it would be on the volunteer aspect as well to continue to boost our numbers with that. So we have resources available. The second thing that we want to continue to focus on is obviously the water supply, work with our engineering and infrastructure as new subdivisions go in. And as we purchase new equipment, we realize the pumping capacity and make sure that the equipment we purchase or procure meets that the pumping capacity. And the last is really to focus on fire prevention and education. We do have some opportunities to get better there within the community. So we're working on some strategies internally with our present staffing, how we can do that to get increased ratings for prevention and education as well. The last thing I want to try to make it a little bit real. and hopefully for council and your worship and the general public out there, the advantage of having that response available within minutes. This was a call where there was a pot left on a stove within a residence. Luckily, the smoke detector went off. Unfortunately, the occupant of the home went outside and left the pot on the stove. So because our crews were in the hall, the response was a matter of minutes. Crews were able to gain access to the house, remove the pot off the stove. The reason I wanted to share that with you, that's why the ratings were increased, because of that response. If you think about how quickly fires grow, right, they usually double in size within a minute, especially in modern home construction. We now have a response that under our volunteer system would take probably 12 minutes. This was a response that was 3 minutes, was able to deal with it, prevented what was a pot on the stove from what potentially could have been a house fire that could have probably destroyed a duplex at that time. So this is a good news story. This is why we continue to do that. This is why we have the increase in what the fire underwriters has given the town of Strathmore for ratings. And it's a good news story. So that's the presentation. The information is contained within the report that's attached in council's minutes. What the administration is asking for is for council to adopt this as information, or accept this as information, sorry, your worship.
Thank you very much, Chief. Are there any questions or comments from councillors at home? Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bass, I just wanted to say we like the uniform, and thank you for your presentation. You're a very good speaker, and I'm very happy to see that we are moving up. I will make the motion unless anybody else wanted to, that council accept the 2021 Fire Underwriters Survey as information.
Thank you for that motion. Deputy Mayor Cox, is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? I'm just looking, Councillor Bauer and Councillor Montgomery. Have we lost Councillor Montgomery? Okay, do you know, Councillor Corbeil, do you know if he had to step away? Oh. Councillor Montgomery, are you in favor of that motion? You're muted right now, sorry. Right now you're muted, Councillor Montgomery?
Sorry, I just I was frozen there for about 2 minutes. Is it too late to ask a question?
Well, we've had the motion and you're the last vote, but we can have a, let's call the question.
Yeah, I vote in favor as well.
Okay, thank you. So that motion is carried. I guess if you want to ask a question, I have one question and a comment at the end. Did you? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this report, Chief. My question has to do with what we can do that is fairly low cost, I guess, or what can we do with the most amount of, or the least amount of money. And I want to also, I want to draw attention to the fact that this is something that this council has been looking at from the start. It's had its eye on this specifically, getting a better rating, with the idea that as we invest in the fire department, that we could, in theory, lower the cost of insurance for people across the community and hopefully save money as a whole. And the question I have, I guess, so I noticed if I'm reading the report correctly, and it shows where there's areas of improvement. One of the areas that it mentioned is pre-event planning. And it looked like there was some mileage or some room for us to gain in that area. Is that something that you will be focusing on to help improve our rating in the future?
That's a great question. Through your worship to Councillor Montgomery, that's obviously the goal of the fire department, is to hopefully increase the rating without a huge increase in cost. And prevention and education is one of those areas that we can sure do that. with some of our existing resources. So the answer is yes. Obviously, I'm only in an interim position. Hopefully, the next chief will have that same view, but I would imagine it makes sense to improve our ratings with the resources we have, and through pre-planning, fire education, and prevention, that is some of the low-hanging fruit we can go after.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my question to you, Bas, and then I just have a comment, is we've had questions from different residents in town at different times. And one of the questions was the number of full-time firefighters. So my question to you is, and I know I totally get the pot on the stove example. That's a great example of how quickly we can respond and how it does affect us as far as this underwriter study. What would be your comments as far as the benefits to Strathmore residents as far as having a full-time or having some full-time firefighters on your staff?
Correct. Your worship, we do have, currently we have 6 full-time personnel that are with the department. We have split them into 2 platoons, so that provides 7-day-a-week coverage for the first out truck with 4 members. So we have 6 full-time members. We supplement that with 1 paid on call. So best analogy that you have 4 bodies sitting in the fire hall that are able to respond. Now, they don't just sit in the fire hall just waiting for calls. We have lots of other activities that we do, from some of the things that were mentioned with Councillor Montgomery, the pre-planning, the education, those pieces. Obviously, once the full-times are gone, outside of their working hours from 6 in the morning till 6 at night, we rely on our volunteers. So some of the challenge with the volunteers is obviously the muster time. So it takes time for volunteers, once they receive the call, to get to the fire hall, get dressed, take the apparatus to a call. And many times that's in excess of 12 minutes, sometimes later, depending on the time of night. And the other piece that I think is important for council to recognize, and I think it's more of a societal concern, is that volunteerism across Canada seems to be waning. People are busier. They've got wear more and more hats. So that is a challenge for a volunteer service as well, is to get those members that are able to respond and able to respond at different times. We chose, obviously, the daytime hours because that historically was some of our challenging times for volunteers as well.
Thank you.
Hopefully I've answered your question, Your
Yeah,
Worship.
thank you. That helps a lot. And if I can just circle back, I should have followed your comments about Joel Blakeney with my own thing, and that was that I had taught Joel in grade 10. He was in the same English class as my daughter, and so I did have the chance to teach him. So what I should have done, and I would like to do now, if council would indulge us or indulge me, is if we could have just a brief moment of silence to recognize Joel Blakeney as a valuable member in Strathmore's fire department. Thank you very much, all. And just so council knows, before Bas came tonight, I had just sent an email to Todd and Audra Blakeney expressing my own sorrow over their loss, and Debbie and I and our family send our condolences to Joel's family, and hopefully they'll be able to deal with the grief. It's a very tough situation. Thank you very much. So we will move on to item 9.5, the ECC After Action Report, and welcome back. You didn't leave, but welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't get a chance to leave. The next item I'm presenting to council is a look back at our ECC, our stand-up of our ECC related to the COVID pandemic. what I've prepared for council is a summary report of some of the key findings. Just as a preamble to the report, if I may, it's called an after actions report, but I would just like to remind the public that we are still in the middle of this pandemic, and there's still learnings that are ongoing. And I'm just going to preface this with, in the 26 years of my career in the fire service and emergency management, this was probably one of the tougher emergencies, if you will, to deal with, just because of the continued evolution of what was happening with COVID and many of the unknowns. So the intent of the report is really to have a look back as part of what you'll see in my report. Any good emergency, we look back and we look for learning opportunities, because there are always learning opportunities regardless of what's happened. We're always very tough on ourselves many a times. It's very easy to look back. It's very easy to be an armchair quarterback and criticize others as to what they did right and what they did wrong. The intention of a look back is really to take those learnings and get better next time. So just with my presentation here, and I would just like to acknowledge this presentation was built by a number of individuals. You'll find in the first page of the report, you'll find everybody that contributed in the ECC by name, because I think there's a big opportunity as well for those individuals to receive some acknowledgement for the dedication and time that they spent as in the ECC, as well as learning some valuable lessons about emergency management. So really what the intent of the presentation is to show you kind of what we were setting out to do within the ECC, the areas of strengths and improvements, and what we would do different the next time. So as council knows, this started in early 2020 when the world started changing. We started to find out about COVID's initial rollout across the world. The town of Strathmore started some pandemic planning. So the Director of Emergency Management and the Emergency Management Coordinator started some pre-planning activities in February, prior to it the world coming to a halt, if you will, on March 17th. So there was planning even ahead of that day, but that's when really we started to ramp up in the ECC. And we took a view that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We knew we were going to be in this for the long haul. I'm not sure that many of us realized that we'd be in it for this long of haul, but the intention was to try our best. We tried to support many of the Strathmore residents with what information we could provide them, reliable information about COVID, because as we know as individuals, there's a huge spectrum of opinions and information about COVID out there. So our real objective was to stop the local spread of COVID, provide support to individuals and businesses out there to help them navigate through all the information from the provincial as well as the federal governments, and to help the businesses through those restrictions to try and make sense of them. Because at many times, not only were the businesses confused, even us in the ECC were somewhat confused with some of the restrictions because they were not black and white. So hopefully what we learned in the ECC, if we sum it up, it really became a communications exercise with our residents, with our staff, with members of council, is to make sure that we became that trusted source and that we pointed them in the right direction. So many times we relied on the provincial source for information as well. So we wanted to make sure we were timely, we were consistent. Obviously we had some challenges because of the changing game that happened every day. And I'll talk a little bit about that. What you'll see here is I would think the biggest crux of the presentation, what I call the plus deltas, or what we did well and what we need to improve. The first thing we did really well, I believe, was external communications. I spent limited time in the ECC working there, but every time that I worked in, our communications piece was stellar through what we tried to convey to the community, what we tried to get out in a timely manner. So I believe our communications was excellent. The other thing that I believe was well done was the citizen survey that was done. It gave us some insight into what our residents were feeling. They were telling us about what communication we were sending out. Was it too frequent? Was it not enough? And it also gave us some benchmarks for where our community sat with things like, you know, the top 10 things, sorry, that you would expect in a restaurant, you would expect in a shopping establishment. So that gave us some insight to leverage off our communication tools again. So I think that was very well done, and kudos to the team. The other thing that I think that was done very well is the experience that was gained by the staff that were in the ECC. You know, we can look back and we can say, you know, we had too many, we didn't have enough, but we did gain some valuable expertise within the community with the staff that were in there. And to build on that, the teamwork that was done within that, that ECC was stellar. As you can imagine, there were times where frustration was very high because things that did not come out from the province that were black or white, it requires some interpretation, and it required us to make some decisions. Obviously, I would suggest not all of our decisions were maybe right. They could certainly be questioned, and they certainly were questioned with what we saw on social media in some instances. And as I learned a long time ago, I can never be right all the time. But the teamwork, the support that was provided there, it was excellent. And I also think that our relationship with the local Alberta Health Services personnel was fabulous, and continues to be fabulous this day. That individual is one individual looking after this region, and he is our primary contact, and he is a fabulous individual to work with. So I want to give a shout out to Norm for being that resource for us. Obviously, some of the more difficult things are some of the things we can look at to improve, but it's looked at through a lens with getting better the next time if we have to stand up the ECC. The first improvement is really the definition of what is within that emergency management role and what is base business. And that's a very tough one it's one we look back now and say it could have been done a little bit better, probably a little bit more efficient. But that's really talking about what's inside the house of the emergency and what's base business of the town, and really needs to continue on being worked in the town. And I'll give a shout out to present administration. I think that we've made strides in making that a lot better currently. The other thing is the coordinated communication between affected parties outside of the ECC. I think we have some opportunities for improvement there. Usually, in my experience with an ECC or emergency, it affects one, maybe a couple of communities. It sure doesn't affect the whole province or the whole world. So everybody was trying to operate within their own realm, and that what made this one very difficult as well. So we tried to communicate as best we can to lean on each other within this region, within the province, but I think there's an opportunity to communicate a little bit better and coordinate some of our activities. Especially when it comes to regional, I'll lead maybe into that next point, the regional approach to coordination. It's very difficult to have different restrictions in municipalities that are so close. And I'll use the example of closing playgrounds. Right? That was one of our tougher decisions, having to make that decision. There was little or no guidance from the province when it came as a result of that. So we toyed with that decision, we weighed the pros and cons of doing that, and we looked to our regional partners as to what they were doing so we can be consistent. But that was a challenge because we had some municipalities that said yes, some that said no. It would have been nice to have more of a regional approach. So everybody that's in this general region would have had some similar restrictions, and we wouldn't had some of the challenges. Well, they're doing it in this community, why are we not doing it here? And again, it's a little bit unique to this pandemic. Hopefully we'll not see that situation again, but I think it's a learning for us as well. And I think that especially in this region, there's a lot of opportunities for some better collaboration amongst the municipalities where that regional approach would make sense. So we would look at that as an improvement opportunity going forward, not only when it comes to pandemic, but as also emergency management as a whole, that we look at some potential regionalization where it's cost effective, where it makes sense, and where we can better utilize all the resources and have consistent communication. because what happens in Strathmore affects many a times what happens in the county of Wheatland, which happens, to affect some of the closer municipalities in the India Rocky View as well. And I think that overall there's some improvements for our EM structure. That's an internal look at, how we did structure our ECC and making sure that we have the right resources should something like this happen again, that we're cognizant of who we're taking out of the town administration to fill a role in the ECC and making sure we have some redundancies there. And it's a tough one to solve because, this one has dragged on for a long time. People get tired. We need to be cognizant. Listening to the presentation earlier today on mental health, that is certainly a consideration within the ECC as, people are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. So those are just some high-level overviews. In my report, you'll see some successes, and I do want to acknowledge your worship for the Facebook Live. I think you became Strathmore's voice of the pandemic. I'm not sure that was what you really wanted, but I think you did a fabulous job, and I think it was a testament to the consistent messaging we were trying to get out, and I think that was one of the good news stories out of that. One of our local disappointments was obviously the grad parade that was canceled at the last minute with some input from the province, from Alberta Health Services. There was an incredible amount of planning that went on. We would have loved to be able to do that. And we thought we had a good plan in place, but unfortunately the province pulled the plug at the last minute. So that was really a disappointment for a lot of people, including the community. Just the highlights going back to, the communication. I think I've said that enough. We had some celebrations, some successes out of a terrible situation. We had people step up. We had community champions come forward. We ended up having a secondary dog park in the north end of town that was put as a result of that. We've got some wonderful additions with our pathways that came as a result of this. As I said, our Facebook Live with Mayor Fuel, the Siksika relationship, I think has continued to build as a result of this. And the family programming fun kits that were done. We just tried to find ways to engage our community through this terrible time. The other thing you'll see is the survey results. I think the biggest learning was to keep things simple. Keep it simple, keep it consistent, and make sure the key messages are reinforced. I know that as we have moved on, the ECC has closed. Obviously, we're still meeting on a bi-weekly basis, just to keep everything in the forefront. We know the numbers in Strathmore are not trending in the right way right now. We see that across the province as well. It's concerning. There's from a local perspective, we have not stood up the ECC. I don't think there is a need to do that at this particular time. We're following the guidance of the province. As you've heard many times in the news, it's a race between the vaccines and the variants right now. And I would echo that. I sure hope the vaccines win and that people do their research and make the right decisions from that point forward. There are, at this point, no set targets or anything for when we would initiate a full ECC again. We leave it, obviously, based on local circumstances. Some things, if we have a huge outbreak within one of the facilities within the municipality, within the schools, maybe we have an opportunity to do something, but at this point we're not in that position. So we have a lot of learnings. What I've shared with council, I believe, is some of the high level learnings. Obviously there's some internal level learnings that we would want to focus on as administration as well, but we just I think based on what we've done, we did our best efforts. It's easy to look back and criticize. We just want to move forward and go forward from here. So I believe that's the end of my presentation regarding the after actions report. Like I said, it's ironic because we are still in this pandemic. So I would look for council through your worship for adopting the report as information.
Thank you very much. I believe we have some questions and comments, and then we'll look to a motion after. Councillor Corbeil, then Sobel, then Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple of questions in regards to working with our partners. Would the WREMP, would that help in any of these instances? Like, would that set up a few improvements, or, you know, could we team up with, not with our partners, with our neighbors?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Corbeil, I think that's a valid it's a valid question. I think administration we're evaluating the potential that a regional approach within Wheatland, which includes Strathmore, could bring to an emergency like this. I think, you know, off the top, there's certainly benefits. There's things we need to evaluate, but I know it's one of the things that we're currently evaluating to potentially bring to council.
May I continue with a follow-up question?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Just on a side note, like, I know that that is kind of drawn up. We haven't seen it. I'm sure you've gone through it. Is it addressed in? Would it be addressed in there already if we were to go down that route?
Sorry, I apologize, through Your Worship. I don't understand the question. Could you maybe rephrase or?
Yeah, you bet I can. In the WREMP, I know that documents exist. Does it contain within those documents, does it address this at all?
I don't think that the current wording of the regional plan would involve a pandemic. That would be more towards, once we agree to all work together, just to look at what type of emergencies are common. But based on what's happened over the past year, I would guarantee that a pandemic emergency is part of that regional plan and approach.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. I have Councillor Sobel, then Deputy Mayor Cox.
Actually, I think it's Deputy Mayor Cox up next, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Sobel. So firstly, I wanted to apologize. I believe I referred to the acting chief as by his first name. So I apologize, Acting Chief. Thank you for your presentation. You did answer most of my question. I think the public's biggest question out of all of this is this potentially going to happen again, where we could go into a SOL, and what would be the reasons to do that? And I believe you kind of said, if the variants get out of control, if there is a outbreak at the school, but I think we're looking for a little bit more than that. Is there anything you could give us that would give us more? Like, is it based on numbers? Is it based on anything tangible that we could say, hey, this is going to happen if we don't get our numbers below 50? I don't know. I guess that's going through my mind, so I'm sure it's going through a lot of the public's mind as well.
Thank you. Through Your Worship to Councillor Cox, or Deputy Mayor Cox. I wish I had a better crystal ball that I could give you a good answer with that, but unfortunately my crystal ball is very cloudy when it comes to things around this pandemic. I don't think we have hard, fast numbers that we could say at this point we need to re-engage and declare a state of local emergency. I think there's factors we need to evaluate that are very fluid. I don't think I could put a single description on that, but if we need to enact, I guess the best way to answer that, if we need to enact and put in potential restrictions or processes that are above and beyond what the province is doing, then we would probably have to go back under a state of local emergency to do that, because otherwise we're just following the guidance of the province at that time.
Thank you. Your Worship, can I make another question, please?
Sure.
So my next point or question would be, I know that you thanked the mayor for his Facebook Live, but I'm wondering if we could, as a council, be more involved. And I don't know if that's possible, but I'd sure like to see that. I mean, I realize that there's stress of everyone, you know, when it comes to this pandemic and future pandemics is high. And even though Your Worship, Mayor Fuel was doing his part, we also need to make sure that he's protected as well. And maybe some of us could have filled in for him every once in a while as well. And I mean, that's what we're here for, the seven of us. So I'm just wondering if maybe you could put that in your possibilities for the future as well.
Through Your Worship to Deputy Mayor Cox, I think that's a valid point that administration can take away and evaluate. And I just want to add that in no way by singling out Mayor Fuel as his Facebook Live.
No.
I don't want to take away from all the other councillors and everything that they've done during this pandemic, because I know you have also helped steer the ship right through the pandemic. But your point is valid, and I think that's a takeaway that we will capture.
Thank you, Acting Chief. And that wasn't my intention, was not to say that, I wasn't looking for anything. I believe we could have done more to help. And I just want you to maybe look at us for the future.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cox. And now I go to Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Chief, you sound like you're beating yourself up a little bit, and I want to, and I know I probably don't have to say this to you, but I think it's important to note that I've been involved in a number of mock disasters, and there's so much to learn in these tabletop exercises and mock disasters, et cetera, et cetera. You walk away with a book of how to do things better. But there's a reminder with this, and it may come to us as a surprise to some, but nobody on this earth has gone through a pandemic. So it was a brand new game, and I think there's lots of criticism to go around to everyone. If I had to pick one area that I was concerned about and continue at times, it's the provincial government, and only because it took them so long to not only regionalize but to provincialize. So when you talk about regionalizing, that's insufficient when you're dealing with a world pandemic. It's got to be bigger than that. It's got to be province wide, and that's eventually what we went to. So we should have been a cog in the wheel. We weren't for so many months because the onus and the responsibility was put on ECC and us. And with a disaster of this making, I'm not so sure that was the best thing. But all that is to say, you guys hit it out of the park. It was an amazing effort. I know what a toll it took to everyone involved in the ECC, and I'm forever grateful, and thank you. And I certainly hope we don't have to go back to a sole. The province has to make some of these decisions for our whole province. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I just want to add, as we look back on these things, it's like you said earlier, it's easy to criticize, but I think your ECC and our administration and our town council would have had a great deal more to lose if we underreacted to this pandemic, and we'd never been through anything like this. And so we did what we did. We made decisions we did. We worked together hard to try to protect Strathmore residents, and that's, if people want to find fault with that, and hopefully they don't, we had the best of intentions to try to look after our residents' health. So I guess at this time, I'm looking for a motion to accept his information. Councillor Sobel?
I'm happy to move that we accept this report for information, Your Worship.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to publicly recognize Baz for stepping in as our interim deputy chief, or chief, not sorry, deputy chief, acting chief. He's done an incredible job, and morale has really improved at the hall, and I just want to publicly thank him for doing that. Thanks, Baz.
Thank you for that, Mr. Legore. And again, thank you for all your efforts. And I apologize too, like Deputy Mayor Cox, I referred to you by first name too, and I fell back into my teacher ways with you. So thank you for your report and thank you for all your efforts, Acting Chief Howell.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to 9.6, Policy Review, Council Policies and Procedures on page 113. And Ms. Sawatsky, are you speaking to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Administration is bringing forward this matter for Council tonight. It's really a housekeeping matter. We're asking Council to rescind 2 policies that are no longer used by Council. We have bylaws that have since replaced them, and that's Policy 1103, Council Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy, and Policy 1104, Council Procedure Policy.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions for administration from Council? Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So while I was comparing the bylaws versus the policies, I noticed that there's kind of a number of ways in which the policies either exceed or maybe just are better than the bylaws. And there's kind of a handful of ones that I noticed, for instance. And so I'm wondering if, I guess I understand there's a review going on, and I'm wondering, when we could look at the bylaws to maybe look at ways that we can improve or kind of bring over some of the points that are in these policies.
Your Worship, thank you, Your Worship. So, Your Worship, administration can bring back the bylaws to Council anytime that they want to review them. In fact, part of the workshop that was planned for Council this coming weekend but has since been canceled was a review of Council's procedures. So at that time, when we kind of have those informal discussions, Council can make recommendations. And if Council wants to make recommendations that were in previous policy, there's no reason that that couldn't happen at that time. The Code of Conduct policy, that was actually legislated a few years ago by the province that a council had to adopt a bylaw, not a policy for that. So that change came in effect there. And in fact, that bylaw was the template bylaw that the province submitted or gave to communities to use. That doesn't mean that we can't change it, but council would just have to instruct administration to bring that forward for discussion, either at a workshop or maybe at a committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, I'm ready with a motion if you'll allow that.
You bet. Thank you very much, Councillor Montgomery.
Okay, thank you. I will move that policy number 1103, Mayor and Council Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy, and policy number 1104, Council Procedural Policy, be rescinded, and that administration bring back the relevant bylaws, that'd be 16-18 and 1908, for review at an upcoming committee of the whole meeting.
Is that clear to administration? Thank you. Comments, discussion on that motion? Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question. I'm assuming that the bylaws completely cover everything that was in the policies. But as we have an ongoing investigation, was either of these policies part of that, or were they based on bylaws?
No, Your Worship. Your Worship. No, Your Worship. That investigation, I believe, is based on the bylaws that are in effect. Those are the pieces of legislation that Council's using right now.
Okay.
These have been replaced.
So we won't do any damage to anything that's already been done, correct?
No, Your Worship. In fact,
Okay.
administration would recommend that council wait for a report back on that investigation prior to considering any changes or amendments to the code of conduct, because I'm certain that there will be some recommendations most likely made by the investigator.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands up, I'll call the question. All in favor of that motion? And the motion carries. We move on to Wheatland and Area Hospice Society funding, page 145. Jennifer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So some time ago, Council had discussions in regard to the Wheatland Housing Management Board requisitioning the town for a hospice. And Council had discussions, however, no resolution or decision was ever made by Council formally. So administration is asking Council to consider making a motion approving of a requisition from the Wheatland Housing Management Board for the operation of a hospice. No dollar amount is needed at this time, just an indication that Council is in support of a requisition.
So Jennifer, if I could just ask a question. So that would just be the, almost like the philosophy of having a requisition as an entity, as a thing concerning the Hospice Society?
Yes, Your Worship, it's to provide assurance to Wheatland Housing that Council would be in support of a requisition.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox and then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So you've pretty much answered my question, I believe, because I don't believe that the hospice was looking for anything right at this point, and Councillor Peterson can reaffirm that for me. So what we are doing is just premises that should they ask 2 months from now and operations begin, then we would be in a position to provide them. But do we also have to put a line in our budget for this?
Mr. Legore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we just need to pass this motion at this time. It'll be some time before we see any requisition for an operation of a hospice. The planning stages are still going on for the new lodge, complete with hospice. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that help, Deputy Mayor Cox?
Yeah, I think so. So basically we're just supporting the possibility.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's just a follow-up to Councillor Cox's comments. I just think for clarification, I don't remember if it was in this council or in the previous council that we did approve this in principle. I think it was in this council that we already approved this in principle. Yeah, right, Councillor Cox? I think so. And then initially there was consideration that the hospice would ask for a smaller requisition in the times leading up to actually building the hospice and operationalizing it. And then in the face of COVID, the hospice committee made a definitive decision to not ask any jurisdiction for any money at all. Am I correct in that, Your Worship, or administration?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there never was a motion of council to support this in principle, although there was a discussion and council agreed to it. A motion was never passed. That's why we're asking for this. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legore. We'll go to Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. And I guess just to Councillor Peterson's point, we did actually, and this wouldn't be on our records, of course, but we did do a vote at the Wheatland Regional Partnership a few years ago, and that did pass, where we all kind of agreed that we would support the idea of a requisition. And with that, I'm ready with the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery.
I will move the council support Okay, I'll move the council support a requisition from the Wheatland Housing Management Board for the operation of a hospice.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have the motion on the floor, is there further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, council. Thank you, administration. We'll go to committee reports, number 10. Anything from councillors? Councillor Montgomery.
Sorry, is this the time where I would report on, like, say, the library board?
Sorry, Councillor Montgomery, I missed that last part.
I said, is this the time when I would report on the library board, or is that for the
Yes,
the
it would
next
be.
one?
It would be. That would be great.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, the library board had its meeting last night, and it was a pretty good meeting, actually. We were visited by a woman from the basically adult learning network, and she was just kind of giving us a bit of an education on the implementation of the CALP program, which is the adult learning program that is done through the library. And one of the things, I guess, so they kind of listed a number of statistics, and one of the interesting statistics that they mentioned was that only about 1% of the population that could actually, would benefit and take advantage, or like would benefit from taking advantage of a program like this, actually ends up taking it and kind of sticking with it. And so it was kind of like, it was made clear last night that there could be a lot done in the way of just us and the community advocating for just more people to get involved with this type of program. Like the benefits that can be derived from adults, just improving their skills, whether it's, like literacy or numeracy, it can have profound effects on their lives. And, one of the examples that was given was there's a woman who has made use of the program in town here, and she went from not passing high school. She didn't quite have what it took to pass high school, and through this program she was able to improve her skills and is now actually in college. So it's a great way to improve our community, to improve like the potential of the people in the community. And so I just want to, if anyone out there thinks that they could benefit from this type of program, I strongly urge them to try to take advantage of it. There's one of the things that was mentioned is that there's kind of barriers to people going in this, and one of those barriers is just people that not wanting to either admit to themselves that they need this type of help, or maybe not recognizing it, or like just barriers like that. And so it's important that people realize that this is here for them, and that they can improve their lives in a number of ways by taking advantage of it. And another thing I can report is that, so the library did close as of April 6th, unfortunately. But so they're well practiced now in shutting down, I guess, but also they've improved their curbside pickup program. And they're actually going to be piloting an app that will facilitate curbside pickup for books. So that will be kind of tested out in the next couple of weeks, and then people will be able to use that app in order to facilitate curbside pickup. And that's all I have on the library board. And as far as the handy bus goes, the handy bus they're up and running, and they're doing a good number of trips. And if anyone in the community needs mobility accessible rides, they can call the handy bus at 403-934-3418. And they can, it's free to become a client or a member of that. And then they will get access to essentially subsidized mobility accessible transportation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Just very briefly, the Seniors Advisory Committee has met, and they continue to work on strategic planning particularly around the area of communication. also are very interested in transportation for seniors, and they are also going to be bringing to council a recommendation for a resolution to the AUMA this fall, and it is relevant to what has happened with seniors in long-term care, and in terms of the assault that COVID has made with regards to that. They've come up with some very good ideas around that, and we're just researching it further. And if it looks doable, once administration has had a chance to advise the Seniors Advisory Council, they'll bring it to council for their consideration. And they're appreciative, by the way, of council's support, and particularly of the support that FCSS is giving to seniors. Strathmore's FCSS is giving to seniors on a very broad basis. So I bring that from Seniors Advisory. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. So I guess we're looking for a motion to accept the committee reports as information. Councillor
I would
Peterson?
move. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councillor Peterson to accept the committee reports as information. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We move on to items directly related to council. 11.1 statutory declaration. Councillor Corbeil, I think you're speaking to this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Should I make the motion and then speak to it?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. I move the council direct administration to make the necessary arrangements with legal counsel to arrange for a statutory declaration for all council members for the I'm going to change that a little bit. For the 2017 to present council's term to be undertaken as soon as reasonable. And I'm going to speak to it. I have brought this up to try and have a reset or starting point for this council. I'm hoping to put the past behind and finish on a positive note. I know some might find this redundant, as it is the same thing as the oath in which we started this term with. But this is a physical or tangible thing to do to prove to each other that we all respect and honor the oath that we took. I hope it could be a positive step forward for this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox, then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have voiced a few concerns based on what was brought forward. You did say present, 2017 to present, but just as I don't really understand the concept of what we're actually trying to do here, because statutory declarations are statements of facts. So what you're going to ask us to do is state facts and declare that these facts are true. So I'm fine with you going ahead and pursuing this, but I do believe that it has to go to some kind of a legal representative to give us some kind of direction. But I'm very cautious to see how vague it can be when it's a statement of facts. It doesn't make any sense what I'm saying.
Councillor Corbeil, did you want to respond to that?
You know what, I think that we can control a little bit of that. If whatever we're hoping as a group, I guess, to get out of this, if we want to be as specific as we need to be, I guess, in order, I guess, for the comfort of everyone in council, if we wanted to be very specific, we can be. You know, and I think that could be a discussion that we have. I wouldn't probably recommend it in a public, as it probably covers a lot of in-camera information. But I think that's a direction we could go.
So I guess my problem is that when you talk about statements of facts, they're different for you than they are for me. We aren't the same people. We haven't done or said the same things. So how are we going to do a general statutory declaration to cover all of us?
No, my intention isn't, it doesn't have to be general. I said we could be as specific as we want. With a specific event, we can state that.
So we're going to all do 7 different stat decks.
No, but whatever I'm going to actually ask Mr. Moore if he has any suggestions on what he thinks we could cover specifically with 7 individuals.
Any advice from administration along that line?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Councillor Corbeil is referring, we could do a modified form of an oath that would handle council for the balance of this term. And we certainly could draft something if we were given sufficient time. If you're talking about past actions, we could draft a statutory declaration that would cover all members of council and be consistent for everyone to sign for past actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legore. I don't know if this helps Councillor Corbeil, but moving forward, we have, I'm trying to do the math, about 5.5 months together. I'm fully prepared as the mayor, not that, I mean, I'm a councillor, I have one vote, I have one, I guess what I want to say is as clearly as I can, which isn't very clear right now, I guess, but I'm fully prepared to trust each other and trust all of you for the duration of this term. I think there's been a lot of opportunities to learn and grow as a group, and we have a short amount of time left. We already have the third-party investigation that may be bringing us some sort of a report in May. So I don't know if that helps you as far as that goes. I'm fully prepared to place trust in each other for the duration. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too follow your same. If as the acting CAO Doug Legore stated, if we're going to do an oath going forward, I'm prepared to do that. I'm a little unclear as to how we would do a statutory declaration on past things, because at this point they would be completely different, and we would all have to have our own, and it would all have to be reviewed by legal before we could sign anything. So, I mean, again, on a go-forward basis, I have no problem if we're going to do some kind of an oath amongst each other, or I am also, in the same realm as Mayor Fuel. 5 more months. We have learned, we have grown, there's been mistakes, but let's move on. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cox. Councillor Peterson?
So I think that for me that what is happening here is that it might be a miswording. Like, to me, when for the decade that I chaired a professional development or the conduct committee, statutories of declaration like the one we have in front of us, that was the stat dec. So what we are swearing to was the oath. So does it matter whether we call it a statutory declaration or whether we call it an oath of confidentiality? This is here for a reason. And, I don't think it is a matter of trust so much as it is a matter of oversight. Just like we have oversight with finance, we have oversight with code of ethics, we have oversight with almost everything that a council adheres to and does. This isn't necessarily just for this council. It's informative for other councils going forward. So to me, the stat dec is what we have here. That is the statement of fact. That's what we all know. That's what we're all attesting to. And it might be a misinterpretation. I would submit to administration about that interpretation. But to me, I think Councillor Corbeil has the right of it. I think it's a good thing to bring forward. I don't think it's a condemnation of anything. It is just a good practice. But I would like to hear from administration if if this is something other than a statutory declaration, if it is an oath. I don't know.
Well, maybe we would have to turn to Councillor Corbeil as to the intent of what you'd like to see. Would you like to see more of an oath for the duration of this council, that we're all bonded to being confidential and carry ourselves that way? Or are you looking at a look back and comment on how this group has been in the past? And I
Honestly, may I?
You bet.
Okay, thanks. We could all pinky swear with each other if we were good with that. Like, I don't mean like this is what I want or something like that. It was just something tangible. I always need tangibles. I need a starting point, because to forget a past, you can't just, unless we all wake up tomorrow and say, okay, fresh start, let's go. It's just something tangible to hold us accountable for the duration. So whatever council is good with, so am I.
So your focus is more on between now and October, is that correct?
My thing is whatever can get us past our past.
Okay, that's good. So that may not necessarily be a statutory declaration. It would be more of another oath. And in the orientation, Jennifer, when councils go through the orientation, is there something signed at that point when we started our term?
Yeah, Your Worship, when council is sworn in, you sign an oath at that, and you take your oath at that time. Perhaps, I don't know if council's, I think if council might consider perhaps a team charter that council develops together to indicate how they'll work together and how they'll act with each other for the rest of the term. Maybe that's that's kind of what I'm hearing from Councillor Corbeil, to move forward and have some kind of agreement in writing that everyone signs off on, that, this is how we're going to work together. Just a thought.
Would that be something that you might want to see pursued then, Councillor Corbeil? We make some suggestions as we'd like as a charter moving forward for the duration of this term, and then we all just sign on and agree to those things?
I am fine with that. I would like everybody's input from council. I have no issues signing a stat dec. I have no issues signing an oath. I personally don't have one more favorable than the other. Like I said, I just want something for this council to be able to finish.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Legore, then Deputy Mayor Cox, then Councillor Peterson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, George Cuff, who's renowned for his governance views in municipal politics, has drafted a covenant. We could take that covenant and modify it a bit for what Councillor Corbeil is trying to achieve here, and bring that to council for their consideration if you're interested. Thank you.
Does that sound like something you'd be interested in, Councillor Corbeil?
Absolutely.
Okay. I will keep that on our minds then, and I'll go to Deputy Mayor Cox and Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And that sounds great. My concern is only that a statutory declaration is a statement of facts. That's what it is. Swearing of an oath, they're very similar, but a stat dec is only to do with facts that have already happened. They're not about promises. So that's where I have my sticky issues. So yeah, what you're suggesting, Mr. Legore, sounds perfect. Sounds great. I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cox. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Corbeil that it is whatever it takes. And I think that, this didn't come to us from the wind. It came, this statutory declaration proposal is before us for a reason. And so I think that it's not something we can just toss out. So I'm looking at George Cuff's covenant here, and I think it's a very good compromise with what we're talking about. And I also acknowledge what Councillor Cox is saying, that a statutory declaration also refers to things that have happened in past that can be identified through fact. And I think that is that it is more reasonable that we go with the covenant that George Cuff has put forward. But I do think that just tossing this out is not the answer. It came before us as a notice of motion for a reason, and I think we owe it to ourselves to see it through in some form.
And if I can just ask you a question, seeing it through, in your view, is this as if we do the statutory declaration, or would also doing the covenant be a way of seeing it through from what?
I am on the same page as Councillor Corbeil. I think that a covenant is every bit as good. What George Cuff has put together is excellent.
Okay.
And
thank
investigation will give us good insight. And so all of those things coming together in a all of those things intersecting, I think are going to be extremely useful going forward.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, if I could ask you or Mr. Legore, would you need a motion then directing administration to bring forward the covenant for us to discuss and consider?
Yeah, I know. Yes, Your Worship, we would. However, there is a motion on the floor, so
Okay.
council would need to vote on that motion first.
Okay, so can we can have, if Councillor Corbeil is amenable, can she withdraw that motion, or do we just have to vote it one way or the other?
Your Worship, we could amend it, or council can amend it, sorry.
So, Councillor Corbeil, if you want that motion to stand, we can vote on it and then see how that goes. Or if you want to amend that motion to lean more in line with the covenant idea, that could be done. And just before you do that, Councillor Montgomery, can you make your world famous motion? Sorry, we already have a motion on the floor. I have to follow the proper procedure. So I'll go back to Councillor Corbeil, and you're on deck, Councillor Montgomery.
I can be quick. I will amend the motion to say, or ask, or direct administration to bring forward George Cuff's covenant modified to our council.
And did you want to bring that forward for discussion and decision then?
Please.
Okay, so if we could add that wording, then you're comfortable with that wording? Okay, so we have the new amended motion on the floor. Councillor Montgomery, did you have a discussion point on that new motion?
I did. So I believe our procedure bylaw says that the person who moved a motion can't amend their own motion. So if that's the case, I can offer that amendment to Councillor Corbeil.
Okay, thank you. So you're offering that friendly amendment? And
I am, yeah.
Corbeil, do you accept Councillor Montgomery's friendly amendment?
You bet.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Cox.
Could you read the motion, or can someone read the motion back?
Councillor Corbeil, would you be able to read that motion back to us? Or
Yes.
do you need administration to, they've been frantically trying to get the motion typed out.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Sure, do it. If you wouldn't mind doing it again.
Yeah, I move that we direct administration to bring forward George Cuff's covenant modified to our council.
Okay, thank you. And then obviously we'll discuss that and make additions or changes to it. Okay, thank you. So we have that new motion on the floor. It was an amendment that was accepted by Councillor Corbeil. So I'll call the question. All in favor of that amended motion? And that motion is carried. Councillor Montgomery, your incredible world-famous motion.
Thank you. I will move that we extend the meeting till 10:30, please.
Thank you. We have a motion to extend the meeting to a maximum of 10:30 or to 10:30. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move on to urgent business. There is no urgent business. Item 14, questions between councillors and/or council statements. I don't see any, so that's okay. We'll move on. Administrative inquiries. 15.1, Councillor Montgomery, RIDE program.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have 3 administrative inquiries tonight. The first one is from Councillor Montgomery. Can administration please provide information on the implementation of a program similar to the recent RCMP inclement weather ride program that would provide rides to anyone who is released from RCMP custody in Strathmore during inclement weather? The second one, also from Council Montgomery. What is the volume of annual fire department responses? Around 350 per year. How much are the full-time firefighters being paid? Can we not manage the call volume with paid on-call members? And why do we have full-time members? Final administrative inquiry is from Councillor Peterson. In 2018 and 2019, testing of the water and soil in Kinsman Lake demonstrated the need to address the pollution of the storm pond. In 2020, Town of Strathmore undertook significant effort to improve the storm pond conditions of Kinsman Lake through a cleanup. Has the water soil of Kinsman Lake been tested since completion of the cleanup efforts? If not, is there an optimum time when such testing is best undertaken? Is it necessary that Council direct administration to arrange for testing if it has not already been carried out? Once the testing results have been conducted, could Council ask that the 2018-2019 results be compared to the recent test results? Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deborah. And at this time, I'm looking for a motion to go in camera for the one item that needs to be discussed. Councillor Corbeil.
So move. Move to go in camera.
Thank you very much. We have a motion to go in camera at 9:31. All in favor? And we're now going in camera.